I'd like to introduce you to two really, really incredible Kenyan journalists. First is Njeri Mwangi. She is the founder of Power 254, and she is also an Emmy-nominated journalist from some of her work with BBC. And secondly, I'd like to have James Smart come to the front as well. He is the managing editor at Nation News Group, and he also is an incredible investigative journalist. You guys are in for such an exciting conversation. Not only are they friends to each other, they're friends of mine. They've done some of the most exciting and well-documented and researched work across the continent and in Kenya. So for that, I will leave you be. Thank you.
Long press.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Could we have some love? Just see some waves.
Just a little.
Just a little. I know it's about, what? It's still February. Show some love. All right. I've looked forward to this moment. I obviously know Njeri. Njeri is not only a friend, but the work that she's done as a producer, as an activist, it's incredible. She's done incredible work. And Njeri, I've been looking forward to this, to ask you some uncomfortable questions. So,
I'm ready for them.
You're ready for them?
Bring them on.
So, let's start from your last project. This is the Madams, the BBC project that you did a couple of months ago. First, for everyone context, everyone who've not seen Madams is a fantastic documentary that is following one of the most important stories of our time on the exploitation that happened, the sexual exploitation that happened of girls. And Njeri takes sort of like a long view to this story, for a story that, from where I sit, took hours and hours and hours to conceptualize, then to build. But my first question is, how did you come to this story? Because I want to ask about the backstory of what happens after the story came out.
Thank you. I've always wanted to be in session with you as well, so I think this is a good moment that we're having. How the story came about, I've done stories before, and one of our undercover agents said she had had something, and I think how these things happen is when you hear something, you're like, is it true? Is that possible? And we said, okay, we really need to find out what is happening. First of all, because it sounded like a rumor. It's not something you want to be true. So she went and checked, because we needed to verify about the source and about the truth of that story. Is it a real thing? And when she went, she came back and said, it's actually happening. And we're like, okay, we really need to investigate. So that's where you then commission, the work gets commissioned, and you say, okay, fine, let's go find out who is doing what, how many kids are at risk, how this system is working, and then you send different undercover agents to get the story. Yeah.
So you do the story, it goes out, and two things happen from where we sit. There's the question of how, sort of like the moral compass of the country, where everything we view things through two lenses, either moral or ethical. And the moral police of the country show up and say, in fact, this is what is wrong with the country. We need to make sure that those women are arrested. They're doing something completely, outside. So they confuse the story and make the story about not what it was. Tell me what happens immediately the story lands and everyone consumes this Madame story.
So the story gets broadcasted, and there's a lot of public outrage that this is something that's happening. And of course, everybody wants these women arrested and taken to court and charged. And the girls, of course, they should be freed. They should be taken, and the state should take them and probably provide them safety. But in a twist and quick turn of events, the government does one of the fastest investigations and comes and says that everything that story was a lie. Yeah? And what that does is it exposes these girls, these women who are covered in this story further into trauma. Because even where they live, people start saying, oh, so you were paid, so you have money. Yeah, so you're going around telling fake stories. And you see, the way we live in a community, you go on your way home, you say, I'll take some tomatoes and 2 bags of maize or whatever it is, and then you come and pay later. So even that credit facility they lost. And they couldn't take anything on credit. And they were not employed. They were doing very menial tasks that would get them very little money to get by. And they were staying together. So they had to continue staying together. So staying together is where their safety is. And staying together is how they can continue to uphold each other and support each other. But it got very difficult. It got very tough for them. And they were called and made to write statements. And it was very scary because this is not something we even anticipated, right? But they did go and they made their statements. But then there was this backlash now from the community. People don't want to be associated with them suddenly because of what they've been through, but not so much so what they've been through, but that they have been paid, because that's the story that stuck, that they were paid.
And so I'm going to ask you as a producer, and just to zoom out a little and say, we live in this environment where the state or those in authority feel like, okay, once you finish your very good investigation, the story has been very well told, you have asked them of their response in the story, and it's gone, and they can come back and say that is simply fake news, or it didn't exist. And this is the environment you're living with currently, as you see. So I want to ask you as a producer, as a journalist, in this new era that you live with, where those in authority actually can contest the idea of truth of a story, where does that leave this kind of sort of long-form storytelling or journalism as a whole?
I think as consumers of stories, we have a huge responsibility. Who's telling what story? Who are we believing, right? Because in this case, the CS is who came and said that my story was fake. But how credible is, when he says something like that, will you just believe? A lot of people from that area in Maimahio came and said, this is true. In fact, you have not even said everything. Come, we'll show you more. Come, let's tell you. And it was scary for me in terms of, if this is just a tip of the iceberg, and the story was damning, right? If this is a tip of the iceberg, and people are saying there is so much more, so people know what's going on. But the danger is the public then does not come to defend the story and say, oh, no, 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 we know that this is true. They don't come to defend the story, not me. You don't need to defend the journalist. You need to fight for the story. You need to fight for the truth. And I think that's where we are failing, not as journalists, but as citizens, as consumers of news. We've let truth stories die. We've let people who are not speaking the truth order the day. And then that becomes, so we are left as victims of truth, of telling stories of truth.
But there's also a further effect. When someone says they can contest the fact and say this is not true, then it sort of gives them a platform. So you have to contest with them and say, okay, this is the truth according to my sources, this is the truth that we've checked, this is the data that says that this is the truth. But then there's that niggling feeling. At the end of the day, they've just had it to say it is not true, or it is not factual. And a whole work of investigation then just ends up in a contest, essentially.
It shouldn't end up in a contest, that's what I'm saying. Because just because Smart, and people like Smart, just because Smart says, I don't like that story, it's not believable, is that now the truth? Because it shouldn't be contestable. It should not be your word against mine. And that's what I'm saying about society needs to take up responsibility and defend the truth and protect our children. The thing that killed me about that story is that its children, we as parents, have completely neglected our children. And the stories of the women, of the girls that I told, well, now they're over 18, but even by the time the story was coming out, is that they left their homes to look for an elderly person who is like their mom or like their dad, to ask for food. That's where it all began, to ask for food. And they ended up in the hands of adults, you and me, adults that then took advantage of them, right? And that became their life. They didn't know how to get back home. They could not take themselves back home. And they were in the hands of adults who should have taken care of them. And when we as adults are not taking care of our children, our society, we don't care about children. When we were growing up, if I did something, I was so afraid that my neighbor or somebody within the neighborhood would know, because they would spank me. And then they would take me home, and my mom would say, "She did what?" And my mom would also spank me, you know. And if my auntie was also in the house, she said, "She did what?" You know, I get beaten again. So we were raised by a village, but now it is children are raising themselves. These children left home to look for food for their siblings, for themselves. So children are raising themselves. We have absconded duty as adults. And so much so that even when a story comes out like this, even then, those girls were still further victimized for trauma that they had been living in, trauma that they had tried to get behind them, and then they were re-traumatized by being told, "You didn't even go through that. It's not true." Yeah.
It's obviously very different telling stories now or being a journalist in this contest. And I will say 2024, 25, from where you sit as a producer, Power 254. So we watch the protest, and your journalism training tells you that when there's a protest, the safest people would be the police. So you take pictures from the police. I know Bonnie is here, and Bonnie would contest that. But this is not him, so it is you. But this is what happens in protest. The training is you take pictures on the side of the police because they are supposed to be the safest people in a protest environment. However, this has changed now. The police actually beat up journalists. The goons, excuse me, the goons actually beat up journalists as well. And in this kind of environment, where do you see the space for practicing journalism with the people that you work with at Power 254? And if you look at just the space where we're in, as a country, as a continent, how do you see this profession actually flourishing or thriving even?
I don't know about flourishing. I think there's a lot of players now. There's a lot of citizen journalism, and I can see a lot of people holding up phones. And whoever sends it fast has the day. Media houses used to chase the headline. Now you can't chase a headline because by the time you're telling the story, it's already been told by 30 people. It's already gone viral. Yet that's where, I dare say, traditional mainstream media was thriving on. So now it's about being present and telling the story immediately. Because if you wait, it's old news. If you wait, everybody knows about it. Tell me something new. Yeah? And people are no longer looking to mainstream media to break news, to tell them things they don't know. I think that our savior there is in that media is still somewhat trusted because you still come to verify, you check. So much has been said by people on social media, on these platforms, but then when the mainstream media then carries the story, you can say that that's been checked, that's been verified. And there's some sort of safeguards in that space that does not exist within citizen journalism. So maybe finding the balance and finding new ways of telling those stories. In an earlier conversation we were having about newsrooms are boring. People are not going to listen to news the way they used to. But again, there's a question of, there's a different audience. We're not all Gen Zs. Gen Zs are consuming news very differently. They're also creating news very differently. They're also telling stories very differently. My parents, and how many people are here on Facebook? Oh, come on, lift those hands. Thank you very much. Yet, in Facebook, among Gen Zs, people are like, "You have Facebook? Oh my God." But that's where people are connecting. And they're not Gen Z necessarily, yeah? But then there are people who are only on TikTok. How many people here are on TikTok? Yeah, it's not the same hands that were on Facebook. There's the people that TikTok and Facebook, the audience is different, and even the vibe, and even how people communicate there, right? So there's all these different platforms, but at the end of the day, which one is most trustworthy? Where are you going to consume what? What are you looking for in TikTok? What are you looking for in Facebook? What are you looking for when you turn on the TV and you go to YouTube to find NTV or KTN or BBC or whatever it is, right? Because in there's a lot of safeguarding, and there's, depending with who is paying, then I'll tell the story about who is paying, whether it's in mainstream media. Yeah.
Then we get to the question of platforms before I open it up to everyone else. The thing about the platforms obviously, is we don't own them. They're owned by this, the Silicon Savannas. They decide the algorithms that make sense for us in all these things. And in essence, the continent then just gets to the end of that question of we just don't tell our own story. We have no space to tell our own story because we don't essentially own the platforms. I want to ask you what you think. What should we do with the platforms? And include the podcast platforms. What is it? Does it matter that we don't own the platforms? Should it matter that we create platforms that we can control and we can own so that they tell our own story?
I truly think we need to create our own platforms. African-owned, Africa-driven, by African stories, African music. Let them come to us. We've gone to them for too long. They're making money with our content. Like, if you do a story and put it on Facebook or Twitter or TikTok, how much money are you making? But they're making so much money because of how much views there are. So we need to create our own content and create our own platforms, and then we tell the stories the way we want to tell them. Because at the end of the day, the money needs to circulate within the African continent, and it's not. We keep paying to Meta. They're making more money, and then they give you a little money maybe. If you're lucky, you get something small. But at the end of the day, even where we're looking to, when governments tell Meta, we don't want James's Smart on Instagram, he's put down because of something he said that they don't like. But if we own our own, we can also go to those offices and say, we want James Smart back. So it's within us. Africa, we have a way we have a culture, we have a way of doing things, we have a way of being that we need to go back to. And I feel like we've lost a lot of that by giving a lot away to the West.
All right, so I'm going to open up for your questions. If there's any questions, just lift up your hands and would come to let the microphone go to her and then her. First. Okay, so the microphone is coming. As it comes, Njeri, I'm going to ask you, my final question is...
Shoot up your hands, let me see you. All right.
Yes, here. Why do you keep going? What's the point of all this even? Why do you do what you do? And then you keep going. Power 254, keep going. Why don't you stop?
I think we've come a long way. We've come a mighty long way, and we have won. We can count wins, and we have to protect that which we have managed to get. People fought, people died for the freedoms that we celebrate today, and we need to protect those. And if we don't, then we will lose them, and we're losing them when we stay silent. So we have to keep speaking. We have to keep doing what we do, because then it keeps them at bay. It keeps pushing them back, and we don't lose on what we have. Besides that, we have more to lose that we need to be fighting for. We haven't won yet, and it will be a continuous fight for different things, right? People can hold their phones, people can make jokes about the president now. Before, it was treasonous to even think, not say anything, to even think it was treasonous. Now you can make jokes, you can make cartoons, you can, I won't say that because then they might come for me right here, but you can do many things, right? Yeah, but it was not always like that. And we need to celebrate that and enjoy that, but then protect that and keep asking for more, because freedom, you can't control that freedom. We need to be able to say what we want to say, how we want to say it, and we need to use that voice to hold authorities to account.
All right. Time for questions.
Okay, so I'm Sarah Busiburi. I'm autistic. I have ADHD. I have highly interested in journalism and just storytelling. Basically, because it's us, people living with disabilities, that are very undermined in society. And there was this story that came up by Njeri. It was about PWD beggars on the street.
Forced to beg.
Yes, forced to beg. And it was really touching in that, not so many people can talk about how exploited people living with disabilities get especially from a point of view where there are people that are above us that still hide us. You're seeing children being locked up in their homes. You're seeing children suffering until they die. And then there's a story, I think I got to know like 2-3 years back, where their child suddenly disappeared or like was thrown out, and the child died. Imagine Good Samaritans had to bury them. So how do you get, because you released that documentary, how do you get society to be accountable to these things? Because it was, for me, it was highly, it really triggered me so much, because yes, I know disabilities are diverse, right? But I put myself in their shoes, because basically I have gone through my challenges, and I know how it is hard to actually become a person in society and be known. How then do you account even the government? I know, obviously, the fact that I love the documentary, how Njeri conducts herself, and like there these discussions that we don't really talk about, right? Because we're scared that we can be there's a word for it, sorry. Yeah, you can be someone can come after you from a superior department, let's say like the police or something, or you can be abducted because so and so in society is just you seem that way in society. I mean, how do you then? Because yes, you've released that documentary. Are you getting people to be accountable to it? Because this is something I'm really talking with so much passion, because I know there's a lot of exploitation within us. People use us to gain something and look like they're doing something good, but then they're not.
All right.
How do you then? Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So it's a question of responsibility.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
How do you make people care? And in that case, how does follow-up look like? You know, so that it's not just a story, that something actually happens in the real world.
I think for me, how do I make people care? You first care about it. Caring about it, how you tell the story in a way that people see the people that you're talking about. You see the people that I talk about in the story. They speak for themselves. You see what they're going through. But more importantly, it's also that people will see themselves in the story, right? You see yourself as a parent with a child living with disability. And what does that mean for you? Have you been hiding your child? Have you been punishing your child? Are you living in shame? Are you struggling? So by how you tell the story, then you're able to see other people who are living like you and see that you're not alone. So you're sort of creating a community, and people find support in that. People find strength in that, right? But also how the story ends should not be one that is so, you're doomed. There's no way out. You will die, you know? You tell a story in a way that is uplifting. By the time that story is ending, that it's inspiring in some way, and it dignifies the people whose stories you're telling. You just have to care about it. If you don't care, no one will. How you tell that story is how people will feel. That's how they will take it.
All right. We had a microphone on that side. Yes, please.
Hi, good evening. My name is Florence Adu. I'm from Ghana. And I want to ask about this vision of our own platforms, because I think about it quite often, and I think it is the way forward. And so when you think about the gap, because we're all here talking about new media, et cetera, the masses aren't on phones. The masses aren't on TikTok. And so when we really want to make an impact on the way people think and the way people live, what is the vision for a platform that integrates the idea that we can't leapfrog. We have really foundational challenges with getting information to communities and outside of communities before we can say, oh, we're all on the same page and we're understanding our stories.
All right, maybe you can take the next question as well and just back it as well. Yes.
So, hi everybody. My name is Jennifer. I just want to piggyback on what she said about having our own platform. I am a strong believer that Africa needs to start moving, getting our own platform, and that's why I'm so proud of Afripods and what you guys are doing. Plaquette. So, and how can we be able to move that to like video, so that our we were talking earlier, we were in the same session about algorithms, where algorithms are not promoting things that are not for us. They are sensitive to our culture, our context, our nuances. So how are we able to build platforms? Do we need to build brand new products, or do we start creating content that speaks to our culture, or instead of mirroring what BBC, okay, Njeri works for BBC, what other people build, what other content, can we start creating content that's very sensitive to our culture? So my question actually, I was just building on her question, but Njeri, when I'm very passionate about children and stuff like that. So as you're telling that story, you said that after the story, you have to give hope. I'm thinking about these children. Do you give them voice? I know we have done one with you guys, but how do you ensure that they have a voice in your story so that adults are not speaking to them? So when Kubwa says, oh, it was fake, children don't lie. Children say as it is. So how do you ensure that in your story that you're empowering children to have that voice? Thank you.
All right. Yes, and then I'll ask Molly to chime in on this question of platforms. I think it's a really big question.
Right.
Yes.
So basically, mine is building up on just what they've
You're
said.
building on the platform.
Yes.
All right.
So I understand the aspect of building a platform that's for us, right? However, I know one thing. Not however, it's not a bad thing, right? Change takes time, right? How do we envision converting people from whatever they are consuming right now to, oh, this is better, this is really good, you should come to this? How do we convert the people now?
All right. Place the microphone at the front and just give Molly. Molly, just tie all these platform questions into one.
Hi, everyone. Well, okay. So I think this is a really, really important topic. In general, owning your own content, owning your own narrative, having space to tell the stories in the way that you want to, in the languages you want, all of these pieces make for something that feels uniquely you. And I think right now in the era of media, we're looking for authenticity, we're looking for raw storytelling. So from my position, what we're doing with Afripods is we're building a platform that centers the African creator, right? So who is the African creator? And you can't just put them, Africa is not a monolith, it's not just one thing. So you have to consider 54 different countries and different languages and regulations and compliance and currencies. And I think that's a big reason why it's so challenging for a lot of the multinationals that come here to build infrastructure that's successful in Africa. On one side, I think it's very validating when you have these multinationals like Al Jazeera, BBC, Spotify, et cetera, coming to the continent. There's a lot of value that's being created here. And it is, I don't want to say a stamp of approval, but it is a step in the right direction of creating paths of partnership and collaboration, which is important, right? We need to do that between countries on the continent. We need to do that between continents globally. So I would say this. Afripods exists as a place for African creators to host and distribute their stories, and for us to have a team as we expand to keep that African creator centric. But there are also communities and these multinational platforms like a TikTok, like a Facebook, like an Instagram, that center Africans as well. There's spaces for each one of you guys as creators or journalists or storytellers to build your own community. And like that narrative of owning your community, whether it's on a Substack, whether it's on a website, I think that you can leverage these platforms to build those audiences. So a lot of words to basically say, yes, we need our own platforms. Yes, we need our place to tell our stories. Yes, we need opportunities to not be censored. But also we can leverage these other spaces as tools. There's capital in other regions. If we don't tell our stories, people are gonna tell it for us. I think there's a little bit of play and there's a little bit of gray area here, but I do tend to agree that we do need more Africa-focused space that is being represented by African people. And I'm very proud of the fact that everyone on my team lives on the continent. I'm very proud of the fact that our team puts people in positions to speak, and it's not just about our brand. So hopefully more brands will continue to do that too.
All right, microphone to this side. There was one standing question for the children. Please hang on it. And yes, yeah, there's a stranger here who shouldn't be asking questions, but anyway.
So hi Njeri, hi James. So the government accused you of giving false information, and that means that's a criminal offense. You go to jail for 3 years. So my question is, what did you do about it? What did the BBC do about it? And then the women who are maligned in Nakuru and accused of being coached witnesses, did you help them sue? Can they sue? Because if they were falsely accused, then they can actually challenge the accusation. And then secondly, maybe you've done many other stories, you've not been accused of any other thing. So what's your best story and why? And is there any result from your stories, or is just we watch, we feel good, and then we move on?
Someone take the mic from this guy. He's asking too many questions.
Let's answer that. And please do not give him the microphone again. Sure, go for it.
Let me start with the question about centering the children. So what you see when the story comes out is 30 minutes, 1 hour, maybe 50-something minutes. But this is a story that we've done for like a year, more often than not, okay? So as you're doing this story all this time, you're developing this story with them. So you may not see them on the screen, but they own the story. They know, and they know what they're saying. They know why they want to say it. And they've not been coached by anyone to say anything. If, in fact, it's about informing them what speaking about this means, why it's important, what is at stake. Because sometimes when you're on TV, then suddenly you're famous, right? They need to know that once this story comes out, then people will know who they are and what they do and what that means for them. And so there's a bit of, let me use the word therapy loosely. There's a bit of therapy in between there. And for both myself as a journalist and for them. Because the stories I tell, these investigative pieces they can be very heart-wrenching, okay? So in that time, there are times you will cry together, there are times you will laugh together, and you move forward. And you shed a lot of the pain, and you laugh about the times that you're in at the time. And then when the story comes out, when my stories have come out, I distance myself with them because I don't want for them to get the same attention, to draw that much attention to them. Let the story tell itself because they've already done that, yeah? And maybe a bit on what Bonnie was asking about then what? Like in this particular story, we're talking about the madams. They were called to write statements. The BBC will provide lawyers that will always be present. If there's need for your sources to be removed from where they are staying for a while because it's gotten too hot, and a lot of investigative journalists here will know that. Once a story comes out, sometimes you need to move and lay low because everyone who feels like you expose them, you put them at risk, and now it's your fault, my business is being closed or whatever it is, then you feel like you could be at risk. So you don't move around the way you are moving around for a while until the story dies down a bit. And the authorities, that's where the risk comes in. Because then if they decide, then for you, by the time you get a lawyer, you go to court all these many times. So the BBC will provide you with a lawyer. Anytime you need to go to court, they will provide you with a lawyer for as long as you need to go to court. So I don't know how long I'm going to be in court if this story. So it's allegations. He says, oh, you produced and broadcasted a fake story. But he has not taken me to court. He has not charged me. Let him come and charge me. If he wants to be true to what he claimed, then he should come and charge me for it. I should be called to court. It should follow due process. It's not enough that he will take a microphone or stand in front of national TV and say that I lied. Yeah, it's not, it doesn't end there. And even for us as media practitioners, that should not scare us in a way that makes you feel like, okay, now I can't do this. It's just talk. And because he's in a position of power, he feels like when he says that now it's law, it's the truth. But is it? It's up to us. Do we decide that that is the truth? But then there's also a due process of court.
All right, can I get a final round of questions?
Oh, sorry, maybe the last, you asked about what has been... Wow. I think they've all been impactful stories. The one that has impacted me the most, though, was the one for Madams. And why so is because the girls I was talking to, they were telling me, it's like we moved back to a time when these things were happening. And we moved back to a time when they were 14, 15, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. So they're telling me this story that you hear as 14, 15-year-old girls. And for me, there were 4 of them, but the 5th girl in that room was my daughter, who was listening to all of this, who is safe and nothing has ever happened to her like that, but could happen to her because this is the world that we're living in. So that for me was the most impactful in that sense. But the stories I have told, people have been arrested and sentenced to long term. And it's you get one out and you don't know, and you save you God knows how many you don't know, and hope that at least it has left others safe, that again you will never know.
All right. One round questions. Final. Going once. Okay. These 2 final ones. The lady and the gentleman.
Hi, Njeri. Hi, James. My question is a bit biased because I'm in podcasting, and in as much as like it's documentary, it's TV, it's like big corp, BBC and all of this, what is something that someone in my position with like my phone maybe and a voice recorder or something like that can do to be able to tell the stories? Because you're talking about responsibility. Maybe I know something that's happening in my neighborhood, or I want to talk to Uber drivers or something. Is there a way, and I ask this because I know both of you have done podcasts or worked around podcasts. What would be the advice? What would the advice you give be for someone who's in a position where they don't have the cameras, they don't have all of these things, they just want to use like basic audio, something? How would they go about the story? Should they do the story or not? You know, that kind of thing.
Okay, the gentleman, so that we pick.
Hi, my name is Alphonse. I just wanted to find out maybe what uncomfortable truths have you learned about the state of African media through your work?
Very good question. Just uncomfortable truths about the African journalism.
So maybe to shed light on uncomfortable truths you may have encountered about the state of African media in the course of your work as a journalist.
All right. So this is the final round of questions. So maybe Njeri can add maybe a little bit. I think one of the things that is really sad about the state of African media is the question of money. That journalists don't get paid what they're worth, and they're asked to take the most of risk. So we ask people to work long hours. We ask people to go do investigative stories. They get exposed to all manner of violence and personal chaos, but there is no equivalent of money. I think that is something that is an architecture that is built within our system, because very few if any African country actually pays for their journalism, right? So journalism is the last thing that the governments and the systems that we've put together want to pay for. They think this is an accessory. We shouldn't be paying for it. And that's very problematic, and we've seen consistently over a period of time how that impacted our governance. So I like to think that the entire continent got the wrong version of democracy, which is the sort of the libertarian part of democracy, the idea that going to elections is democracy, and it ends as that, as opposed to it's a whole governance system, right? So the people that get there and how they get there is important, all right? The things that they do and how they do them is important throughout, not in these 4 or 5 years bands that we get into. And unfortunately, I think that because we got the wrong end of democracy, our friends from the West incentivize that. So they would train us for election coverage, but not for the governance, all right? So throughout the periods, Africa gets attention during elections, but not during the governance period, which happens all the time. And that's very problematic. And I think it's one thing that has made our journalism not to take off, in essence. And so we struggle because the normal citizen in the continent doesn't see, mostly, a need for a journalist. That is not true in many other societies.
I think for me, the other ugly truth is journalists go through so much to tell the story, to bring the story. And sometimes some of these stories are very traumatizing, but there's no support. So you're told, go be objective, do not be biased. Even in a biased story, you're told, go and bring the story and follow it through, especially if it's an investigative piece. It's a documentary, so you don't know what will happen, when it will happen, how it will happen. When you're chasing the story, somebody dies, somebody gets injured, somebody gets a chronic illness, and you follow this story up to the time that they die, okay? And you're exposed to all of these things, but then you're supposed to go and come, you know? Go, shoot, and come back, file, and then we'll give you another assignment. But what's happening to this human being, this journalist that is telling this story? And I feel like that, for me, is the ugliest part, that we want the stories, but we are not giving the support, not social, not psychological, not, mental, and journalists are just left there to survive on their own.
Gadoni's question.
Gadoni, use your phone. Be consistent. Follow your heart. What is it that you want to share? Follow that and use what you have. You don't have to aspire to have a big camera, to be in a newsroom, to be all these things. Use what you've got, do it so well, and tell your story and be consistent. We know, when I look for Gadoni's podcast, I know she's talking about this. In fact, when anyone asks, I'm like, yeah, you should listen to Gadoni's podcast. So if you have just a phone in your hand, just go in a nice quiet room and do your thing. And then put it out there. Go big and tell people this is what it is. This is where you'll find it. Just the tools that are there existing, use them.
All right. Thank you very much for listening to our podcast. Njeri, thank you very much. It's a fantastic conversation.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you to my good friend and colleague, James Smart, and good friend as well, Njeri. And the question there that she had to answer is because it might carry forward to home as they take a picture. Just a bit of a context there. One of the last people asking a question, it happens to be the Mwangi behind Njeri Mwangi. And I asked him, hey, you could have saved some questions for home. He said, I don't carry work home. And this is the place I can get to ask the difficult questions. So that's how he got away with it. Let's also appreciate Boniface Mwangi here as well, who is a photojournalist par excellence and also has faced the darker side of the work and what it has to offer. So asante as well for the service that you've given to this nation. Thank you, James. Thank you, Njeri. And thank you, Madam Jansen, where you are. Yes, there you are, and Team Afripods for the platform that you offer for many voices. As someone did bring it up, not everyone has one of these gadgets. So when you give a platform to people who have something to say in a story, you're doing a big service for the continent and even the globe. So asante sana.